It's Romania Black, and we're on Land of the Lustrous, episode 9. Last episode was pretty crazy. Living up to the rule of 8, let me tell you. An archetype that I had decided that I really liked as a character is gone. I was expecting at some point for a character we really liked to get taken. I was hoping it wasn't going to be Daya or Bortz because I really like them. But I really gravitated towards Antarcticite. I like their story and everything, and then they're gone. And I'm like, well, easy come, easy go. I had to take some time off before this episode because I was like, oh my God, dealing with the aftermath of all of this. And plus we have Phos going through a metamorphosis where they've added the gold onto their arms, and now it's seeped into their body, which is so crazy. It's like body horror. Like with the Agate, it was yeah, it's their legs, but it's just their legs. The gold is seeping into their entire being, which is malleable and terrifying. So I'm like, okay, cool. But I do have a couple comments before we start. But we only have 4 episodes to go. This episode, the next 3, and then I'll get to the manga when I get to the manga as I go. But it's so wild. I almost want to hold off on watching these episodes to the last minute because I want to savor this series for as much as I can. I felt the same way about Puella Magi Madoka Magica because that series is only 12 episodes in a movie as well. And I know they're making another movie as we speak. But I felt at the same time that I wanted to savor those episodes as long as I could because I was like, oh, once they're gone, they're gone. But at least there's the manga. At least there's the manga afterwards that we can read. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I want to go through these 2 comments real quick. Pineapple and Flipnote both had similar comments about Yellow Diamond from back when we were introduced to them, saying, I like how Yellow Diamond, the oldest of the gems, said they didn't know why they were fighting anymore. And it was the youngest, Phos, who reminds them of the reason, because they love adamant. It's such a simple thing, but experiencing so many years of fighting, so many years of losses, it made it hard to see the point of it all. Phos still has that pure optimism that they all must have had when they were young, and that's something very much needed amongst them. Which makes me terrified, because the more that Phos experiences these hardships, and the more they battle harden themselves to be able to protect the people they care about, the more I feel that Phos is going to lose that innocence that they once had that is so necessary, and it's just breaking my heart thinking about it. And hopefully that's not the case, but it feels like it's going that direction, and it's really hard because I'm like, no, Phos, don't lose that. That's what connects you and Cinnabar to begin with. So I don't know, maybe I'm just being negative with it. Maybe I'm just being pessimistic, but I'm hoping that that's not the case. I felt a similar feeling when I was watching Monster. And if you haven't seen Monster, you should go watch it. It's great. But there was a main character that I was like, no, don't go this route. Don't be this way. And it ended up being okay. So maybe that'll be the case here. Who knows? And then Death to Boredom 338 says, I personally saw the surprise garnered by Phos plainly stating that they wanted to fight because they love adamant as a display of the honesty that comes from being innocent, because Phos is the youngest of all the gemstones. Phos is also currently operating on 2/3 of their memory, so it would probably make sense that their innocence is also due to their ignorance. Well, now they've lost their arms too, so maybe that's the counterbalance. Maybe they won't lose themselves. They'll just keep being innocent because their memories are all gone. I don't know. I'm just so nervous, y'all. I'm so nervous. Oh, I don't know what to do about it, but we just need to watch this episode and get through it, I suppose. Anyway, we're not gonna waste any more time. I've dreaded this episode, but it needs to happen. We've got to get through it. So we're gonna look at episode 9 of Land of the Lustrous, and we're gonna do that here in 3, 2, 1, and I'll see you all on the other side. Well, that was heartbreaking. That was really freaking sad. Ah, the price of power. The price of power. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm not gonna lie. This is the most bittersweet episode of anything I've watched in a very long time because there was such an innocent charm to Phos, and you just fell in love with them instantly because of how sweet and innocent and just aloof they were. And then, I mean, it is character growth. It's character growth, and Phos. One thing that I am glad with is that by the end of the episode, once they started interacting with the other gemstones, and once they saw Cinnabar and remembered that they were trying to find Cinnabar a job and trying to find Cinnabar a purpose, I was like, oh, thank God. Because the moment that Phos said, who's Cinnabar? I was like, no! All of my fears were being realized. I was like, I don't want you to forget about Cinnabar. But it was like Phos had been so obsessed with adhering to taking on Antarcticite's role that they had let Cinnabar slip out of their mind, which is still heartbreaking and tragic in itself. Don't get me wrong. But the moment that they actually confronted Cinnabar and were like, oh, yeah, and they started to get like a little uncomfortable and all this, I was like, okay, good. Phos is not gone completely. Right? Phos has not gone completely. Although there's some pretty terrifying implications in this episode. I was like, oh, but I was like, okay, they haven't forgot about Cinnabar completely. And I'm gonna look at this episode from an optimistic perspective, which is maybe not a sound choice or the correct choice, but I'm gonna choose to do it because I am typically an optimist. So I was like, we'll look at this from a not a rose-colored glass, but from a glass half full perspective. So I think that we'll talk about more when we get their confrontation, but I think that this could actually benefit Phos in the long run. Maybe, possibly. We'll talk about it because of various reasons. So we'll get into that. But in the preview before the intro, just the look on Phos's face when an Arcticite is taken and Adamant blames themselves and says, nope, it's my fault. An Arcticite was taken because they'd formed this attachment to me and I'd let them get too close to me, and thus they became reckless because they were so attached to me. Adamant from this episode seems to definitely ascribe to the idea that I kind of get it now. I get why Adamant is so against the Lunarians and so against humanity merging back together, because Adamant sees, from what I garner from this episode and previous episodes, they view emotion as a problem. Emotion as a hindrance, and emotion as a way in which it can be a weakness. And so they kind of, say, it's my fault. I fostered these emotions in an Arcticite and they got attached to me and that led to their downfall. And Phos, I don't know if Phos gets all of that, but for Phos, they kind of view it as, shit, my master that I care so much about and love thinks that it's their fault an Arcticite has died when really it's mine. And that just kind of adds to Phos's guilt. And it's like, ugh. So you just like watching Phos be in that such fragile and pathetic state at the beginning of the episode is really hard. And it just, I feel for Phos because, I'm all about character growth, but it's so hard growing up. And it's so hard when you're innocent world. Like Phos in this episode compared to episode 1 is a completely different person. Completely different. 100%. And it's losing. And that there's so much that this one moment of seeing how much Phos has changed says. It shows us how much grief changes us. Losing people we care about changes us. Death changes us. War changes us. When we lose something that we consider precious, like that drastically affects us, even though we're the same person, it makes us change in ways that can be viewed as kind of sad. And there's also like the connection to growing up and adulthood, and you lose that innocence that you had when you were a kid, and that carefree, lifestyle kind of changes when you realize how the real world functions. And there's a dark side to the coming of age story. And I feel like Phos's transition in this episode to taking on the mantle from an Arcticite is really sad in a lot of ways, because that sweetness that Phos had and that innocence, that blissful unawares is kind of shed in this moment. But they seem to have grabbed Bort's attention through that, so we'll talk about that. But it's heartbreaking. There's nothing else to say except it's heartbreaking. And I get it. I get that Foss's character development comes at the price of them losing a lot of that innocence. And I was really worried because they imitate an Arctocyte a lot at the beginning of this. And towards the end of the episode, when the gemstones start to come back out, they start to regain a little bit of the Phos characteristics and the Phos attitude and demeanor. And I'm like, okay, because the one thing I don't want Phos to do is try to imitate an Arctocyte. Because one, an Arctocyte's reaction and attitude around Phos was mainly because they hadn't been around other gemstones and they didn't really interact with anybody else except Adamant. So they had formed this codependent relationship with Adamant. And so their demeanor and attitude really, I don't know if it's the best reflection of their actual personality, but also you should never try to imitate someone else because it's impossible, right? And it takes away from who you are. So I was afraid in this episode. I was like, oh, Phos, don't try to imitate an Arctocyte because one, you don't have the love to Adamant that they did and the devotion and dependency upon them. But two, that'll take away from who you are. So I was like, don't try to be somebody else. And I get that they're paying homage to an Arctocyte and trying to like live up to them as out of respect and paying tribute, but I didn't want them to take it to the point where they lose who they are trying to imitate someone else. And I've seen that in other series where a character dies and they kind of take part of them with them as a means of paying honor and tribute to them. But it was so hard to see this episode called Spring. I do love the heels. The heels that Phos has with the gold little stilettos there, really, really nice. And the arms it shows like a transition that they've like 13 days have passed. So basically 2 weeks have passed. Their arms have gotten better. They chop their hair off to look more like Antarcticite. I do like the haircut. The new haircut. I like that haircut in anime is usually used as a transition, a character growth moment. I do like their hair. It looks really good. I also, the idea that they used part of their hair, I was like, well, what'd they do with the gems? Did they just throw them away? That's memories. Don't throw away memories. But they used the gemstones to patch the parts that we saw last episode that had cracked and fallen off. That makes more sense. But just like the steeliness of their eyes, I hate how cold and emotionless they look throughout most of this episode until the gems come back. Like, it was really sad. Like, it broke my heart. It made me want to cry. Because I didn't want to see Phos like this. But the one advantage is that Phos has more strength now. So they have more strength now. I like the fact that they can use their arms like that. Also, they've grown in size and scale. And Rutile talks about how they had to accompany and allow for the alloy platinum mix, the gold platinum mix to get in there. They also are a lot more like Cinnabar. We don't get to see Phos use their abilities around Cinnabar because I was very curious as to how Cinnabar would react to seeing Phos have a similar ability. Foss and Cinnabar are kind of two sides of the same coin now. They're both strong. And this episode talks about how strength comes with loneliness. Because you feel like an outsider, you feel like you're disconnected from everyone else if you're the one that has to be strong, right? I feel like Bortz has Dia, which helps them, but I want Phos to have Cinnabar because Foss and Cinnabar seem like they're two sides of the same coin now. They both have an alloy type metal floating around them, whether it's the gold that Phos uses or it's Cinnabar's element that they have with them that looks like mercury. They both have that same element. They both are kind of isolated because of their circumstance. Phos with everything they've gone through and Cinnabar because of their ability. And they're both kind of lonely, but they both could be lonely together. Watching my ship slowly just float on the ice and just kind of just be stagnant there. I'm like, I don't want this ship to sink. Don't make this ship sink, show. Don't do this to me. I've gotten so attached to the idea that those two will come together. And this episode was like 2 steps backwards and then a step forwards again. And I was like, okay, we're not totally done yet. All right. Also, my one big fear is that Phos keeps looking for the newer versions of the Lunarians. I'd be like, I don't want any new Lunarians to come about. No, that seems like a bad thing. But Phos is obsessed with getting Antarcticite back. They have the little foot that's so tragic with the one toenail. They have the foot in the bowl, and they want to collect the rest of Antarcticite back and bring them back. And I'm like, And that obsession with wanting to bring them back, I worry, will make Phos reckless. Because Phos has power now. They have an ability to fight back, and they're using an Antarcticite sword, which is another moment, because Obsidian is like, oh, well, I can fix that and make it, attached to your arm. I'm like, what is this, Dororo? So I worry that Bort is going to talk, because Bort seemed like they wanted to work with Phos. I feel like Bort's very much the type of character to me that seems like they don't really show you respect unless you've earned it. And Phos bothered them a lot earlier on in the series because Phos was so laissez-faire and like, I don't know what's going on. And Bort's like, get with the picture. And now that Phos has got with the picture, I feel like Bort's is going to want to talk to them more and be like, okay, you're strong. All right. Maybe I can talk with you and we can work this out and work together and train and do stuff like that. Like I could see Bort wanting to do that. But Bort seems to have Daya. Daya is Bort's weakness. As long as Daya's okay, Bort's fine. But like if something happened to Daya, I feel like Bort would be in the same boat. So my fear is that Phos believes they're stronger now, and Phos believes that they have a chance to do good and actually fight. But if they are so obsessed with getting Antarcticite back, like if one of these Lunarians shows up that has pieces of Antarcticite, I don't think Phos is going to react rationally. Like they're acting cool as a cucumber in this episode and just handling things. Like we got the parallel of them and Amethyst, and now it's literally Phos saving Amethyst instead of the other way around, and it all feels all well and good. But if that new Lunarian shows up with bits of Antarcticite, then I don't think Phos will keep their cool, and I think we'll be back at square one. And part of this episode is Adamant talking about how you can't fight a war and be emotional. It doesn't, those emotions conflict. And as long as Phos is in control and doesn't show emotion, they seem like they're on top of things. But the moment that emotionality towards getting Antarcticite comes around, I feel like they're going to make a mistake. And then Phos is so self-loathing and so hard on themselves when they really don't have to be, that I feel like if they make a mistake after all this, they're going to just dwindle back down to the bottom of the barrel. And I'm like, and I don't want that for Phos at all. So it's really hard to watch them this episode. And Adamant, Adamant's kind of like, I don't know what to do. Like Phos is just, I feel like Adamant understands why Phos is this way, because it feels like Adamant has become this way because of their losses too. So it feels very cyclical. And I've seen so many anime that's talking about breaking the cycle of violence and war, but I don't know how that's possible in this show. So it's just, Also the fact that the gold that they're standing on at the very beginning of the episode looks like a spider lily. Again, showing that they are in mourning from losing Antarcticite. Also, I was very curious at first to be like, Phos talks about being Antarcticite's successor, and they're talking about controlling everything better, and they seem very emotionless. And they're like, I'm not as fast as I was because of the gold and platinum, which is an interesting trade-off. The gold and platinum seems like it gives them a lot of advantages, but it makes them less fast. And Adamant's like, you need to rest. And Phos is like, nope. And the sad thing is, Phos doesn't want to rest because they have nightmares about losing Antarcticite. And there's a lot talked about in this episode with grief, because, and Phos keeps saying, I have to keep busy. If you've ever lost someone very close to you, then one of the ways that people grieve is that they just keep busy. Because the moment they don't keep busy, they start to think about them and they get sad. So they're like, if I just keep busy and work, then I won't have to worry about being sad. And you do need to grieve and process. And so them crying and being like, I don't know why I'm crying. I don't know if Phos cried before this episode. In other episodes, I don't think they did. I think they were just sad, but I don't think they cried. But the fact that Adamant calls it a flaw of an ancient creature crying, I'm like, that to me tipped off the Adamant's like, I don't really want us to have these emotions because that brings suffering and pain. And Adamant doesn't want to bring suffering and pain to the gemstones. And if they go back with Lunarians and complete humanity, that's going to bring suffering and pain. And he doesn't want that. So I get it, but it's like, having emotions and such as love and sadness, that's part of being human, but they're not human. So it almost feels like Adamant's like, well, we could just live on this, in this utopian existence, as long as we defeat the Lunarians, and then we don't have to worry about emotions and sadness and pain and suffering. And I'm like, okay, we'll see how that goes for you. But yeah, it's so interesting now because Phos seems so much more mature. And then when the other gemstones wake up and they start, like, we'll talk about them fussing over Phos, it makes them look so innocent and them look so naive, and Phos looks so much mature in comparison. And it's just wild to see that. And you're like, I wasn't expecting the 180. One thing I really hate is when Phos is like, if I didn't throw my sword, if I just reached out, I could have gotten them. But I'm like, you don't know that. I was like, you were in control of that gold and platinum alloy. There's no way it would have worked. They were too far away. But it's just, again, connecting to Phos's self-loathing and the fact that they still feel, despite getting stronger, that they didn't do enough. And it's like, ugh. Also that damn foot. And they're like, I want them to bring you with them next time. And they're like, I wanted to become more like you. I can't bring myself to sleep. Yeah, I don't blame them. But that was my question, is that if they were going to stay awake during the, also the shot of Phos looking up and seeing Antarcticite coming out of the basin. What a terrifying imagery. And Adamant's like, you need to sleep. But that was my one question, was if Phos is Antarcticite's successor, how do they go into hibernation if they don't want to sleep? How do they go into hibernation? I guess they don't have to sleep, but you would think that they do because they kind of like show signs of fatigue. So my question was, how do they take Antarcticite's place? Because Antarcticite literally could not be out during the spring because of their body composition. They were stuck in the basin until it got cold enough they could reforge themselves. Phos doesn't seem to have that problem, unless if it gets too hot, I could see them talking about the gold and everything and having an easy melting point, a low melting point. So it could be that if it's too hot, then Phos can't control the state of their arms, maybe. I don't know. I thought it was interesting that they finally powdered their legs. I feel like that was a mangaka decision to be like, I don't want to keep drawing these candy cane striped legs. So we're just going to put powder on them and we don't have to worry about it. Which is fine, but it makes sense that they're like, we can't do that with the metal because the metal's just going to become liquid and melt off the powder anyway. But I like that Phos tries to like repair Adamant's robes to be like, to make Red Barrel not be so mad at them when they wake up. And Phos is like, well, I cut my hair so I can do something, I'm sure. Again, it's so crazy that Phos went from being a character that couldn't do anything and was, there are parts of Phos's growth and development that I appreciate and like in the beginning, Phos is like, well, I can't do anything. I don't have any purpose. I don't know how to do anything. I'm just here and clumsy and there is a part of me that's like, I love Phos's growth in terms of them becoming a character that wants to work and do things. Like they're like, oh, I'll fix your robes. I can do it. I can try. I know how to do my hair. I can do that. I love that growth for Phos. I just hate that it came at the price of them losing so much of their innocence. It's just really sad. And it makes my heart hurt. Also, hi, Daddy Adamant. There's a reason I know that they are they and they're non-binary, but I keep giving Adamant the male pronoun for he because them traps up there, y'all. Them traps. What? So the daddy energy rating off Adamant in that one scene where we got a sliver of his backside was more than I've seen from half of the male characters I've watched this year. I was like, ha! So everybody's horny on main for Adamant. I want to know why Adamant looks so much different than the other gemstones, because I feel like there's a reason for it and the show has not given us that reason yet and we're just waiting for it, but I feel like it's there because damn. Like, unless he's got enough gem in him to, like, build it up, but, And yeah, Phos just sitting there sewing up everything. I like that they can make their arms become multiple arms through that, like the alloy can become multiple arms. And Phos saying, I've never seen winter turning to spring. Living beings change so quickly, don't they? Yep. It's frightening. And Adamant's like, you do too. And Phos says, that's true. I have changed. It's very true. But then that's when they get sad because they're like, they have changed. And them losing Antarcticite, it's frightening. It is really sad. And I like this show touches on the existential crisis of when things do change. It is really sad and scary. And there's nothing we can do about it. And that's like that feeling of helplessness is something we have to deal with as people our whole lives. And it can be really traumatic. And for these gemstones that are seemingly immortal, having this change come about. And I wonder if that's part of the reason they hibernate is because they're immortal. And this way they don't get to see the change of winter to spring. They don't get to see that evolution and be reminded of that. And Phos has to be reminded. That shot of Adamant wiping away Foss's tears, that may be the thumbnail. I don't know if it'll fit or work or not, but that scene of him wiping away Foss's tears is so crazy. Also, with Phos having the multiple arms, are they kind of like I don't know a lot about Hindu culture, but they kind of remind me a little bit of Shiva, maybe. Maybe it's Shiva with the multiple arms. And Phos is like, I can't control my tears. And Adamant's like, well, that's a flaw of an ancient creature. Also, this room that's kind of got the crack in it and stuff, was this Cinnabar's room? Or is this just a different room? I don't know. But anyway, so it's spring. They've all roamed around and everybody's dressings and stuff are all like loose and everything, like they've been roaming around. Jade's over there curled up next to that one gemstone. But then Phos reveals to Rutile that Antarcticite's gone. When Rutile thought that Phos was Antarcticite, that was really sad. And then they're like, will you go check on Cinnabar for me? And Phos had to think about who Cinnabar was. That part, I was like, excuse me. That was my nightmare. My nightmare was that Cinnabar would be forgotten. Luckily, that's not the case. It took Phos a little bit to remember them. Like, it took them to remember Jade, but show, you gotta stop doing that. You gotta stop doing that. Nope, that makes me mad. Now, Morganite is the pink-haired one, and they have a hardness of 7.5, so good for them. And then they're like, oh, I'm just not all with it, because Rutile's like, you don't remember Cinnabar? Really? The one you were obsessed with? And they're like, I shouldn't have said that. They're like, I think that I'm just a mess right now. Which makes sense, because they're going through all of this, and they've forgotten, little bits and pieces, and they have to think about it. So then I love that immediately Red Barrel's already in their summer uniform. They've already transitioned. They're already like, time for summer uniforms, okay. And then on the 22nd day, Antarcticite was stolen from us. And an Arctic successor. And that's when everybody's like, oh, it's Phos. And they have new arms and new hair and everything. And this part here where Phos uses the alloy in their arms to do like the battle plans and all of that, it was really heartbreaking to me, because seeing Phos take on this like military role was unexpected. And I was like, oh no, but you were so sweet and innocent. And all the other gemstones are like, where is the Phos from before winter? And it's like, well, Phos grew up and after 300 years, and it's pretty heartbreaking. I feel like Bortz obviously though has more respect for them, but it's such a transition. Like, Phos went from being where nobody cared about Phos, nobody thought that Phos was of any value or purpose, and they just overlooked Phos as just being clumsy and in the way, and now everybody's obsessed with Phos. And that's what Phos wanted, but it's like, you be careful what you wish for is basically the moral of this, because you just might get it. I hate when they have their half-lidded expression where their eyes are half open and it makes them look so apathetic and disinterested. I hate it. And of course, Phos didn't go find Cinnabar, and Rutile's like, well, I went and found him. And Rutile, I like that Rutile is trying to be somewhat of a wing Jim, being like, maybe you should go talk to them. Maybe you should go talk to Cinnabar, especially now that you turned over a new leaf. And Phos is like, well, I don't have anything to say. Now that part hasn't changed. Phos didn't know what to say before, and Phos still doesn't know what to say to Cinnabar because they haven't really made any progress in helping them. And they're like, plus, and they're like, how it almost felt like Phos was like, how would Cinnabar feel about these changes that I've made? Am I going to worry Cinnabar by making them be like, well, what's happened to you now and all of this? Also, Dia with the stick poking at Phos. I'm glad there were some moments of levity in this. That part was great. Also, I like that Yellow Diamond's gloves are a little bit different than everybody else's gloves. That's really fun. But I love that Dia is so curious about Phos's state, as is Bortz. The moment the gym started to pester Phos, I felt like everything was a little bit back to normal because a little bit of Phos's personality started to come out. But bless, everybody is just trying to hurt Phos and get up in their business. Not necessarily hurt, but... And then Bort says, are you happy now that you're stronger? That's because Bortz is like, that's what you wanted. Are you happy you got what you wished for? And Phos says, well, it's not done me any good yet. And to me, that means Phos is like, I'm not strong enough yet. I'm still improving. And Bortz is like, oh, you think? And then Phos is like, I still need to keep improving. And Bortz is like, well, I can help you with that. Bortz has a very Vegeta vibe from Dragon Ball Z, like let me help you with this by battling you. And it's like, oh my God. And anything that brings Phos back to their original state just a little bit, like when they looked over to Dia and they're like, oh, Dia, you're here. And Dia's like, I'll help you, Bortz. Hilarious. And Adamant's like, well, you're quite popular now, Phos. And Phos is like, please help me. And so I like that Adamant makes them all line up. And I don't know why that one's pointing at Phos. I guess we'll find out maybe next episode. But they're like, I want to fix you, take your measurements, dissect you. It was like the cell block tango over here. And Adamant lets Phos get away. And that's when Adamant says, power brings loneliness with it. I feel like that's maybe one of the reasons why Adamant didn't want Phos. I feel like Adamant did love that innocence that Phos had and was like, I don't want you to lose that. Because you're instantly, even though you're not strong or the most powerful, you have the ability to easily make friends with the other gemstones. And I don't want you to lose that. And now that you're powerful, that brings burdens with it as well that I didn't necessarily want you to have to face. And Adamant knows about loneliness because they're powerful as well. When they said it's a secret, I was like, that means yes. That means yes. Also, the gemstones wanting to get lifted up by Adamant. I don't blame you. I don't blame any of you. But the moment that Phos ran off, I was like, oh, good, they'll see Cinnabar. Because if anybody's going to run into Phos out in the middle of nowhere, it's Cinnabar. Also, is there a height difference now between Phos and Cinnabar? Now that Phos has gotten bigger? Maybe. And they're like, oh, good morning. Cinnabar seems very frustrated and grumpy and mad that Phos is different and just greets Cinnabar. And Cinnabar's like, oh, lost your arms now too? Like points out being like, oh, this is the one thing though that made me feel like, okay, maybe if I'm looking at this from a glass half full perspective, now that Phos is trying to get away from the other gemstones because they all want to just mess with Phos, maybe that will draw Phos more to Cinnabar because Cinnabar doesn't seem to have the same reaction the other gemstones have. Cinnabar's just like, oh, you lost your arms, huh? like, oh, what happened? Lost your arms now? And they're like, oh no, this is just a little change. I like that Phos like, this is just a little change of pace. And I'm like, oh, really? Oh, is that it? That was the one thing I was like, maybe now, because before Phos didn't know what to say to Cinnabar and they were really embarrassed and shy and timid. Now, Phos seems to be less shy and timid, but still doesn't know what to say to Cinnabar. But maybe this will lead this change. I'm looking at this from a glass half full perspective. Maybe this will lead Phos to open up more, or at least interact more with Cinnabar and be like, oh yeah, I'm not too, shy anymore. I can talk to you. And Cinnabar will be like, okay. Like maybe this will lead to the two of them interacting more and getting to know him more. Because honestly, even though I was really bummed when Phos said they couldn't remember Cinnabar anymore, if you think about it over the course of the series, they've not had that many interactions. Phos has interacted with them at the beginning, and Phos felt bad for Cinnabar, and Phos was kind of like enamored with Cinnabar and wanted to try to help them and felt kind of pity for them. But I feel like now the one thing is that since Phos kind of has had all these changes happen, maybe instead of feeling pity and awe for Cinnabar, they'll find a place of relation with Cinnabar and feel like they can kind of understand them better. And so maybe that'll lead to some good interactions, because honestly, them and Cinnabar don't know a lot about each other. So there's a lot they can still learn. And Cinnabar does not seem impressed with their answer. And they're like, And they said, I think I'm making good progress on finding work for you. So at that point, I was like, okay, Phos isn't totally gone. They still remember some things. But it's been a real surprising turn of events. And Cinnabar's like, you're lying. I'm not listening to you anymore. I don't care anyway. I feel like Cinnabar's like, fine, lie to me and don't be honest with me. I want Phos to be able to open up to Cinnabar, but I don't know if Cinnabar is in a place to offer them anything back. So I still have hope. I still have hope for these two. I really do. If we don't get it in the next 3 episodes, I have hope in the manga that we'll get more with them. I need that, but I don't know what to do with it. And Phos just being like, like when Phos is like, with the sweat drop, that gives me hope. That gives me hope that, okay, maybe Phos will be able to interact more with Cinnabar. They're not just going to run away or be shy and be like, I don't know what to say with you. They're going to like, what do we do now? Like, that part made me feel happier that for the two of them. And they're like, they knew I was lying, but at least Cinnabar hasn't changed. And Phos is like, I have my own problems to deal with too. So at this point, by the end of the episode, I liked that Phos kind of shed the demeanor of Antarcticite and was back to being themselves, because I'm like, you're not Antarcticite, even if you try to be. And so then I like that Phos is immediately like, what's going on? They're like, well, Adamant's fallen asleep and they hurt themselves. They kind of like drift off when they're sleeping and hurt themselves. I don't know. I wish we knew more about Adamant sleepwalking, but maybe we'll find out more in the next couple episodes. I can't believe we only have 3 episodes left. I'm so glad there's still the manga, because this doesn't feel like it should be anywhere close to being done. So curious about that. I'm curious about that, y'all. I wonder if this was a situation like so many other series where the manga was not completed by the time the anime did that season. And so the anime just hasn't kept up with the manga. And now the manga's moved on. But, which I am curious if I just want to look. I'm not going to look at spoilers. Don't worry. I just want to look and see if the manga is still ongoing or if it has actually completed. Okay, the manga is completed. The manga completed this year. Holy shit, the manga ended this year in April. Wow, that's wild. It ran for 12 years. Holy shit, that's crazy. So yeah, again, this came out in 2017, so the manga wasn't completed. So that seems to be... I don't know if that's going to be... Don't give me any spoilers yet, because we still have 3 episodes, but I'm not going to be surprised knowing this if the manga, since it was ongoing, if the anime just ends with either a cliffhanger or ends definitively without ending definitively, and then we have to go to the manga afterwards. That seems like the way to go, but I can't believe it ended this year. Crazy. What? Back in 2024. I'm recording this around Christmas, so that's why. But again, Phos offering to go on patrol is so different from how Phos would have reacted 2 episodes ago. Phos volunteering to go on patrol because they now know that they can handle it is such a different vibe than how they would have been like in episode 7. Wild. Also with the summer outfits, what I really like is they're androgynous. Like they're shorts, but they're jumpers at the same time. Like I would wear the shit out of this uniform. I don't know about the high collar. I like a V-neck or like the collar to be open, but I would wear the hell out of those black jumpers. That would be super cute. And they're like, no, I got this. And then we see the parallel of them and Amethyst. But they're like, it's still an old version. And there's so much with Phos fighting, like how they've changed in their demeanor from walking in. They're not reckless going in. They focus and know the adamant's not there. And they also are able to think and be calculating about it. Like, there's parts of it that I'm happy for Phos because they're able to protect themselves and defend themselves and they're not just helpless. But to tell you the cost that comes with being able to defend oneself and that loss of innocence is really sad. And it makes me very sad. And I don't know how I feel about it. So I'm like, well, I do know how I feel about it. I'm heartbroken. It's bittersweet. It's very melancholy. It's bittersweet because you're happy that Phos can defend themselves. You're happy that Phos can fight. You're happy that they're not as timid. But at the same time, they've lost some of that charm and innocence of their youth that you're just like, damn, what do we do about that? So, but yeah. And then Bortz and Daya, they're like, wow, you're so different. And because, I mean, back in the episode before episode 6 is when Bortz showed up and Amethyst and them had just been crushed and Bortz had to save them. And now Bort's like, what do we do with you? And we see Phos kind of smile and walk away, but that half-lidded expression, I kind of hate it because it seems like Antarcticite. It doesn't seem like themselves. So what do we do? Ugh. Anyway, I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm really excited to see what will happen next, but my heart breaks. My heart breaks so much. Anyway, I want to talk about the end panels, right? We need to go to the end panels. Yep. Okay. So there are 2 end pictures that I want to show you all, and I'm going to take a picture of it real quick to show you. I don't think I showed the one from last week, which the one from last week is my desktop now. I've changed it again. It's the one of Antarcticite. It'll probably stay up for a while until spring because it's winter, so it feels perfect. But the one for this week is of now Phos with the sword doing that. So when it gets to be spring, I may change it over to that. So yep. So we got next week. My heart breaks, y'all. My heart breaks. What can we do? But anyway, I'm really excited to hear your thoughts down below. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 10 of Land of the Lustrous. Bye.